Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. It is the second day of August, which is the second day of the Empathy 14. And one thing that was yesterday was that what I noticed yesterday was that I don't have the energy, passion, or commitment to do the Empathy 14 with the public. And so, what I plan to do instead is to share day 2 and day 9, with you. Today's day 2 because it's August 2nd, and the prompt today, um, all of this is in the book Spark the Heart, and you can also get the free Empathy 14 if you're interested. Just send me a DM, I'll send it to you. But day 2 is pay attention, understanding people's emotions when you are with them. Paying attention to how other people are feeling can positively impact your relationships. And some things to do to take action is are related to just making sure you're paying attention to yourself too. So a walking meditation, focusing on a body scan. If you've never done one of those, it's you know pay attention to what your head feels like sitting on your neck, what your body feels like sitting in your chair. Um, but the what I want to talk about related to today and paying attention to other people's emotions is really related to the election, quite frankly, and this TED talk that I wrote about pimps and empathy. When I first got to North Carolina A&T in 1994, I remember walking onto that campus and just being astonished. Um, 12,000 students, almost all Black, so many who were Black that it almost makes no sense to use the caveat almost. And it was one of the first times that I got to experience the wide range of diversity um, within Black people. I, for the first time, met Black people from the Caribbean. From the for one of the first times met Black farmers, and I don't mean like a little acre or two. I mean 150 acres, work their family farm in the summers. Wealthy Black people because they were farmers. I met Black atheists. I met Black Catholics. I met um, Black people that were so smart, it was scary, wicked. I met some of the world's best talents. I met average old, everyday Black people. I met Black people who were poor, Black people who were raised in the exact same way that I was. I met Black people who had been in school in white environments, and this was their first time really being around Black people all day. But one of the most important relationships I developed at A&T was not super close, and it was with a woman named TJ Muhammad. And TJ, at the time, was just one of the most brilliant political strategist I had ever seen. And she almost single-handedly worked to get 100% voter registration on A&T's campus at the time. Um, she would host rallies to help us kind of understand the way that the government works. TJ was one of the first people who I learned from was that the government was culpable in the killing of Black Panthers. I learned from her that Huey P. Newton had his PhD. I learned from her that Martin Luther King's assassination, the government was culpable. I learned about J. Edgar Hoover and his targeted attack against Black people. I figured out from knowing Taryn Muhammad exactly how crack cocaine ended up in my neighborhood community. And so when I think about empathy and the part that I hope I can help more people to understand in my TED talk, that I don't feel like I did an excellent job of helping people understand in the book is that the definition of empathy is understanding what another person thinks, feels, and believes. I'm gonna say it again. The definition of empathy is understanding what another person thinks, feels, and believes. And when I think about what happened with the National Association of Black Journalists this week, I can't help but to bring up when former President Donald John Trump was asked about his policy position for creating total immunity for police officers. He was asked about Sonia Massey and the fact that she was assassinated in her home. And from what we saw on video, he has not been convicted. The police officer is in jail. But from what we saw, the man told her he was going to shoot her in her effing face and then proceeded to shoot her in her face as she was cowering down on the ground with her hands in the air saying, I'm sorry. And in response to that, the former president says, well, crime is up in Chicago. And what I think is fascinating right now is that the city of Chicago, look, they sometimes I think I'm up against math challenges that we've had in educational systems for years and not against hatefulness. Because of the number of people in Chicago, they would definitely have more murders in Chicago. So, as an example, some small town, Platte City, Missouri, probably doesn't have any murders a year. But when you have a town with over 1 million people, the idea that you would not have any murders every year is is that's aspirational. Okay. So to compare murders in Platte City to murders in Chicago, regardless of what the people look like, what their socioeconomic status is, that does not make sense. That's why we look at murder rate, the number of murders per 100,000 people. And when you look at murder rate, Chicago is not even in the top 10 of dangerous cities in this country. So then the question must be, why would we keep saying Chicago? Because it doesn't matter how racially diverse Chicago is. When you say Chicago, when you think someone is from Chicago, what do you think in your head? What do you think those people look like? And that thinking is what we have to understand in order to be able to make the best decisions for ourselves. If for nothing else, we should not repeat it. We have to recognize it for what it is, which is a racist dog whistle. I wrote a article this week about Senator Kamala Harris's name. She's the Vice President of the United States. Her name is Kamala. It is not that difficult. Comma, as in the punctuation, la, Kamala. We know how to say Mark Zuckerberg. We know how to say Andre Iguodala. We know how to say George Stephanopoulos. At least most people do. But the former president called George Stephanopoulos Slopalopoulos. I think that regardless of how you choose to vote, um, I think we would do well not to get stuck in personalities and who these people are, because in some ways, I understand how folks would say it doesn't matter who's in the office, and empathy. Understanding what another person thinks, feels, and believes is understanding why would a person mispronounce your name over and over and over again? Why would someone do that? And it's not that hard. Why would someone call every smart woman they talk to wicked and evil? What's the purpose of that? And when you start to stop projecting our own feelings onto people, because if there's one thing around policy that is near and dear to my heart, I know I am biased. I am not unbiased. I went to an HBCU. In that audience, go back and watch the video. I'm pretty sure I heard people clapping. The room was probably 100% Black journalists. I heard somebody clapping when former President Donald John Trump mentioned that he had donated or legislated that $250 million go to HBCUs. $250 million a year. I don't intend to debate that. That is true. He restored, you must ask yourself what happened to it. He restored an annual allotment to HBCUs of $250 million. The Biden administration has allotted 16 already, $16 billion to HBCUs. And I'll say once again that I think I am often up against math. Do you know how many years it would take? Let me do the math quick. Let's see. 16 billion divided by 250 million. It's over 60 years. It would take somebody do the math for me and tell me what the actual number is. What's 16 billion divided by 250 million? I know it's over 60 years. It would take over 60 years to get it given $250 million a year to get to the 16 billion that has been allotted to HBCUs. What we clapping? What are you clapping for? And again, I am not telling you who to vote for. What I cannot understand, well, I do. What I struggle to get behind, even as a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner for years, is that inclusion does not mean everything. I do not have to make space. I remember when I would attend these global empathy circles. I got to make space to be able to go next week. In the global empathy circles, people were astonished that I was not willing to sit down with the known white supremacists and practice my empathetic listening. We're not talking about people who have white supremacist ideas. We're talking about white supremacy, meaning you think that your white skin makes you better than me, that I should have less rights than you, that all things related to black and brown people is racist against you. You know, these kinds of thoughts, right? Like these are folks who actually believe in hanging people because of their race. Now, why would I put myself in that position? Why would I do that? I'm not going to. There is no requirement because I'm being inclusive to take disrespect. And we keep waiting for someone to go too far, like to cross the line, to knock the stick off of our shoulder, using proverbial language from when we might have been fighting in high school. And the line just keeps moving. Well, they better not do this, and then they do it. Well, they better not do this, and then they do it. Well, they better not do this, and then they do it. Listen, it doesn't matter what how people try to separate themselves from the policies outlined in Project 2025. Here's what you need to know. Here's my main notes. We already have loosened gun control laws. The document overtly calls for more guns. Title I funding, which goes to the nation's poorest schools, is all but suggested to be ripped away. And in addition to ripping away funding, schools that do get federal funding, i.e., public schools, those students, based on what is written, oh, I'm not interpreting what is in Project 2025. I got the document Thanksgiving of 2023, last Thanksgiving. And it took me 9 weeks to read it. I finished it around the week of January 26th. It it is not minced words. It's not jargon. It is clear and overt, and it says, "Look, we gonna deregulate. No more regulations around the environment." Somebody asked me this week, "What does that mean?" That means what you don't need a law to tell someone not to put ink in water or not to pollute the air, or not to put too much weight on a train so that you don't have um, accidents. Well, we just gonna get rid of those laws. Well, guess what's gonna happen when you get rid of those laws? There's a reason why those laws are in place, because companies were putting ink in water, because people were lead was in gasoline, for goodness sakes, and children had lead was in paint when you did not have regulation. Folk out here dying and companies still doing whatever it is to make money. You need environmental regulations. When you don't have them, you have things like poor air quality, poor water quality. There are 4,000 cities in this nation with water quality worse than Flint, Michigan. Why? Deregulation is why. This is dangerous. For every public institution, there's a suggestion that they all be private. Money, let make more money, make more money, make more money. And if you understand, when you understand that people are willing to do anything to make more money, that is empathy. That is cognitive empathy. That is understanding that what they think is greed, what they feel is greed, and what they believe is greed. And once you understand that, you'll stop trying to negotiate in the way that you have, and recognize that you have to mobilize people around issues that matter to them. I think the government in general is very inefficient. I could give you a litany of examples. And we need the Department of Justice. And we need the Department of Education. And we need the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Dr. Ben Carson is the one who wrote the portion of Project 2025 that's focused on housing and urban development. And basically is suggesting all things where anybody gets any subsidies or free housing be eliminated. We already saying we're gonna put homeless people in jail. Now what we gonna do with all these homeless people? This week in that National Association of Black Journalists, I do not think that certain interviews should happen, because you will not see me interviewing somebody who, look, you if you just middle of the road, you got an opinion you want to suggest, you could even be on the other side of what I think, feel, and believe from a policy position. But if you on the other side of what I think in terms of should poor people have rights and be taken care of, we don't have much to talk about. And it's not that I lack empathy, it is that our values are misaligned completely. And if our values are misaligned completely, I'm trying to figure out where are we going here. And I just cannot. Do you know how impossible it is to interview someone who's not going to be honest? When you hear something like, um, there are policies to make it such that a woman can have an abortion in the ninth month, that's ridiculous. Even if it's going to harm the life of the mother, at the ninth month, they can do an emergency cesarean. What you're talking about is not true. It's not true. And when we give a microphone to hatefulness, what it does, or the equivalency I like to think of, is like planting weeds out in the sunny spot in the yard, and watering it. Why? Weeds don't need that. Weeds gonna grow anyway. And here we are. I don't feel like it is my responsibility to save this democracy, but I have always tried to get more people to vote. I have always tried to get more people registered and let people know that if they are not on paper, they can vote. I must continue to do those things. And also, for all the policies that impact you, I want you to not be oppressive to other people. We talking about deporting 700,000 immigrants. Who you think that is? We talking about getting rid of work visas. Who you think working at the Stowers Institute and MRI Global? Who you think working there? Trying to help you figure out how to solve for Alzheimer's, and uh, making measles vaccines. We've got so much work to do. And when somebody throws out immigrant this and illegal alien that, using that language, it's another dog whistle. And it might not apply to you, but you got to recognize that when someone says invasion, calling folk animals, you have to understand the thinking, the feeling, and the beliefs of someone who would do that and then behave accordingly. Stop projecting your own stuff on people. Oh, well. And then Harrison Faulkner talking about when you were shot. One time in my life, once, only once, I had somebody shooting and I was right in front of them. They weren't shooting at me, they were shooting past me. And my instinct was to get on the ground. I have seen a bunch of shootings that I have been able to observe from an auxiliary's perspective. Nobody is sticking their head up, especially if you're not a trained assassin. We don't watch these movies and we believe anything. It's sticking your head up. And that's why I bring up TJ. I hope to be able to live to see when the files are released. Because when the Nixon files were released, it looked like everything TJ had told me in 1994 and 95 were true. When the files on King were released, when the files on Huey P. Newton were released, when everything came out about J. Edgar Hoover, almost everything the conspiracy theorists were saying was true. And so while I don't intend ever to be a conspiracy theorist, what I do know is that I hope to live to see the files come out about what happened with that assassination attempt. Because I have never seen the behavior that I saw when somebody's shooting at folk. And I know there are cultural differences. By and large, Black people will run, honey, when some shooting is popping off. And sometimes other people don't. They try to see what's going on. I get that part. But you've been hit by a bullet. The last thing you about to do is stick your head up. I don't believe that. And so I think what is interesting is that I have been listening to my elders suggest that, people have died for you. You need to vote. Gen Z is not motivated by that. Gen Z is motivated by policy positions, so they can get behind policy. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you know a young person who is anywhere near voting age and they just need to be 18 by November 5th, they don't have to be 18 at the moment. There's an election here on Tuesday. If you're not registered to vote, it's too late for that. But if you know anybody that's anywhere near 18 years old, a US citizen, um, go ahead and ask them if they're registered and then have them get on their smartphones and get registered to vote. And just ask them about a couple policy positions. Do they feel like no matter what the police do, that they should be able to not be prosecuted? They already have qualified immunity. Do they need total immunity? Do you feel like you should be able to talk about race, gender, and sexual orientation in school? Do you feel like that there should be some laws around what you can do to the environment? Do you feel like that people should be able to um, refuse service to folks because they're gay or not? I was disheartened this week because I kept seeing this meme rotating around talking about that there's a woman, I can't even remember what country she was from, and I don't have time to look it up because it was just, I knew it was false when I saw it. That the suggestion was that there was a trans woman who had beaten um, a woman assigned female at birth in the Olympics. Not true. Now, why would somebody make up that story? When Caster Semenya was competing at the highest level in her field, she was assigned female at birth. She had more testosterone than most people do naturally, I assume. And they knew that this was not performance enhancement drugs, and they still disqualified her. Unfair. And if you say you value inclusivity, I just know that inclusion does not mean everything. And those of us who have the ability to mobilize to increase engagement, because the strategy again is always the same. Anti-intellectualism, let's keep people dumb. Let's talk about millions and billions as if they're the same thing. People do it all the time, millionaires and billionaires. These are not the same thing. They're not even close to the same thing. If you sat down and tried to figure out how you could use up $1 billion and go broke, you can't get there. You can't spend $1 billion in a day. And if you could, and because you can't, the interest is going to keep you from going broke. It's just so much money. And almost everything you buy that would make you go broke is going to generate more money. Warren Buffett gave 99% of his wealth away, and he's still one of the richest men in the world because he was already a billionaire. These folks that have were moved by $1,200. I ain't got no jokes, but I will say this: what makes you different from the people who have 200 billion and are doing everything for the money? Just going to say we don't need unions anymore. You can treat workers however you want. We don't need any form of public housing anymore. The reason people are poor is because of their own poor choices. Is that where we are? Is that where we are? And so for this reason, I have zero capacity to do the 14 days of empathy with anybody else. I'm going to do my 14 days all by myself. I will post the 14 days. I'm going to post them all at once so everybody got them. Or I might have to do two so everybody has it. But I'm just going to focus on making sure my stuff is right so I can help mobilize some people to vote. Maybe I can be like Stacey Abrams and turn Missouri blue. Who knows? It's filter free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.